Greetings everybody! Welcome back to Moonlight Productions. Today, we are looking to the 14th state to join the Union, Vermont, or the Green Mountain State. The state has some well-known companies, arguably Ben & Jerry's ice cream being the most famous. There's also John Deere, which started in Vermont. Now the company is headquartered here in Illinois. This is a big company for the agricultural department. In addition, there are many famous products from Vermont, or more accurately, from the Northeast, most famously maple syrup, a vital part of your morning waffles and pancakes. Finally, Vermont is also known for some very famous elected officials, such as our 30th U.S. President Calvin Coolidge, or more recently, Senator Bernie Sanders. Native Americans, primarily from the Abenaki tribe, have lived in Vermont for 10,000 years. French explorers visited the area in the 1600s and built military bases, and others would follow suit. Eventually, the site would be having some of the battlefield action during the French and Indian War from 1754 to 1763. After the French lost the war, Vermont was an independent country during the American Revolutionary War. Known as the Vermont Republic, the people were just trying to mind their business and stay out of conflict. Even though Vermont claimed they were an independent country from the U.S., the U.S. Continental Congress, which admitted the original 13 colonies, still wanted to bring Vermont alongside with the original 13. That didn't fully happen, but it would soon be arguments would arise as whether or not Vermont was an independent country, could either part of Canada or part of the United States, and looking to gain some more money and resources over the Vermont area. To avoid fighting and gain some much needed money, Vermont agreed to join the U.S. New York essentially bought Vermont into the Union, and Vermont became the 14th state on March 4th, 1791. The Vermont Republic was sunset. As the rest of the nation began to bloom and prosper, Vermont didn't build such a large city like New York City or Boston to get more people into the state. As a result, in 2023, Vermont's largest city, Burlington, is only home to around 40,000 residents. Much of this can explain why Vermont has such a small population and isn't really growing quickly. Vermont has the second smallest population in the country, with only around 648,000 residents that live in the Green Mountains, or around 0.19% of the US. Only Wyoming has a smaller population. As for the landmass, Vermont is 43rd in size. A little over 9,200 square miles make up the Vermont landscape. The state capital is also the smallest state capital in the nation, Montpelier, with only around 8,000 residents living in this town, if you want to call it. Nevertheless, it can be an attractive location if you're looking for a small community, but known as an unprecedented aspect of Montpelier. A little fun fact that may or may not know about, Montpelier is the only state capital in the nation where there is 0 McDonald's in the city limits. While it's still a great place for many people to call home, Vermont is also a state that isn't exactly growing in population. So with all that out of the way, grab yourself a pancake with maple syrup as Moonlight Productions presents the top 5 good or bad about Vermont. Number 5, the political junkies. This placement is very different from states that get the attention from the media and pundits like Arizona, Georgia, and Ohio for being swing states. Vermont is very different. Vermont is one of the most Democratic-leaning states in the country. As a matter of fact, Joe Biden's best-performing state in the 2020 election was in Vermont, with a 35.4 margin over Trump. Even the Vermont Republican governor is described as a Rockefeller Republican, fiscally conservative while socially liberal. If you pay attention to politics, you can witness Vermont makes wildcard candidates while still voting for Democrats. Even though Vermont is one of the most liberal states in the country, Vermonters are also okay with some conservative ideas such as relaxing gun laws. Over half the state's residents are registered with at minimum 1 firearm, one of the highest states in the nation when it comes to firearm registration, which is pretty weird for a state politically because nearby Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, and Massachusetts would scream at the sight of a firearm. Politics is something you can't avoid in this state. The state's residents are all into the federal, local, and tiny communities are in the area are very political. So if you want fewer politics consuming your airways, consider living in another place. Number 4, the lack of diversity. It is exceptionally white in Vermont, and I'm not saying that because of the snow. Vermont is the whitest state in the nation. Over 94% of the Vermont population is white according to the 2020 census. Vermont has always been in the top 5 in the country in terms of per capita whiteness, along with other states like West Virginia, New Hampshire, and Maine that frequent in the percentage of white locals. While it's not a deal breaker to not have a melting pot of diversity in the community, it's also very appealing if you want to enjoy different types of cultures, the food you eat, and the kind of stories you can discover when living in a diverse community. Number 3, the cost of living and taxes are suffocating. Not only is Vermont the most heavily taxed state in New England, but it's also one of the highest taxed states in the nation. That's just the tip of the iceberg. The income tax can get as high as 8.75%. Even lower brackets are still mean. Plus, the 6.24% sales tax is also present. Even worse, considering neighboring New Hampshire doesn't charge a penny on the consumption tax. Although the property tax is lower in Vermont compared to New Hampshire, Vermont is still the 5th highest in the nation. And if you own that average priced Vermont home, you're still going to be paying around $4,500 a year on your home. And it gets worse from there. Once you've shriveled your money in taxes, you're going to have to work to be able to buy all your essentials, and you're going to have to buy all that at an increased price, because Vermont on average is around 15% higher than the national average on your cost of essentials. Or if you have about $100 on your person, your spending value is going to be around $97. Vermont is alright, but it can be a deal breaker considering the subsequential placement. Number 2, the lackluster economy and job market. Vermont is not only an expensive place to live in, you won't be able to get big and better jobs in the nation. Vermont would be the smallest independent country if every single state in the US decided to split and become their own countries. Although per capita is better, being middle of the road in terms of sound production. Although this is not 100% surprising. Not only is Vermont's population size, but it's also considering how Vermont is mostly small towns. Burlington being the largest city with only about 40,000 people, the median average wage in Vermont is alright, but you can only get some of what you want. So if you're looking for a little bit more, you're going to have to move somewhere a little bit bigger in terms of an actual job market. Number 1, the cold winters. Not only is Vermont the only landlocked state in New England, but you also have to deal with a ton of frigid airs that come south from Canada, and you also have to deal with a lot of the lake water areas, especially if you live in Burlington, being next to Lake Champlain, so there will be a solid amount of cold and snow that accumulates. Vermont is actually the snowiest state in the Union, which is pretty shocking considering that Alaska isn't. But you also have to deal with the fact there's a lot of ocean on Alaska, which moderates the snow temperature. With it being average about 90 inches in Vermont, Vermont beats all the other states like Maine and New Hampshire and Alaska in the snowfall category quite effectively. It's also still cold, with the average temperature being 43.2 Fahrenheit. It's not the pure most miserable state when it comes to the environment, but the conditions can make it a truck ton of frustration to navigate and be around. Number 5, the farm to table. Coming straight from the farm to the table is extremely common in Vermont, as for other states where it's not all that common. Vermonters are also very local people, so that quiet and small town vibe creates more farmers in the state to be employed. Agriculture is also vital to the state's economy. Fresh and affordable goods are also prevalent in the state. So if you ever want to visit Vermont in the summer, you're gonna want to go to a local food market in the state. It's considered a significant activity and a must-do if you want to live or visit in the state. Number 4, nice people. For a state like Vermont, where the overwhelming majority of Vermonters are not religious, which is considered a common trait for people to be considered a nice person is if you're a common churchgoer. Living in the South can justify that trait. Most of New England, or rather the West from New York and Pennsylvania out east, they consider to be very rude people. But Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine are some of the exceptions to this rule. This might be because Vermont's minor town nature teaches everyone that you should be nice to your neighbor. But of course, being nice to people is how people judge friendliness is still subjective. Still, Vermont is very friendly with a positive attitude. From the tipping to the people on the phone, and the residents on the road are also respected. Number 3, the great outdoors. You should visit Vermont for more than just the mountain winters or in the fall times with the changing leaves. You should see other areas of the state during the summer, which is also considered very appealing. You should visit places like Lake Champlain. You won't find any monsters, but you'll get to see beautiful sights on the lake, on top of other river and lakes you're going to also find. Vermont is also famous for many activities like fishing and hiking, along with other outdoor activities like hunting. If there is something outdoorsy to do, you should do it in Vermont. Number 2, Vermont's infrastructure. Vermont's internet infrastructure isn't very appealing, a lot of spotty internet services which makes work from home more inconvenient, but it's all great from there. The energy infrastructure is 12th in the nation, and more prominently, the transportation in Vermont is the best in the country. Rural public transit is rare throughout America, but Vermonters make it a big deal to rely more on a proficient public transport system. New York is the only one outdoing them in the public system. Other qualities, such as the quality of roads, the bridge quality, and the commute times in Vermont, are also some of the best in the nation. It makes Vermont the best state in the nation regarding transport quality. So, if, paying high gas prices isn't your thing, consider trying out Vermont and doing a public road system. And the best thing about Vermont is the lack of crime. Do you want to be shot and murdered in Vermont? What about being robbed? Have you been considering your house broken into and set ablaze? Well, Vermont isn't really into all that. It sounds kind of depressing. But if you like safety, Vermont is for you. Vermont in 2022 was recorded as the third safest state in the Union. The only other state beating them is New Hampshire and, Maine. Those three seem to like each other very much. Vermont has a crime rate of 173.4 per 100,000 people. According to the World Population Review for the current quarter of 2023, to recap, Vermont is a place you should consider to raise a family, view the Green Mountain State, good education, and a safety-orientated environment. So that's it. Those are some of the good and bad about living in the Green Mountain State, Vermont. There are obviously going to be more positive or negative issues about living in Vermont. If I never mentioned them here in this video, please type them down in the comments down below. If you haven't, please subscribe to Moonlight Productions if you haven't already. This helps keep me motivated to make more content. If you also have some time, follow me on Twitter. Thank you so much for your time and take care of yourself. Bye!